Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvis, Pedig Dalid Halacha Vav. We're going to be learning Daf Lamed Aleph. We left off on Daf Lamed Aleph, 7 lines from the top by the new Mishnah. And basically, we have been learning up until now in the Masechta all of the rules regarding Avodas HaKarka. We're not done yet, but that was the focus of all of the Mishnayos and that we have been learning. And we're making a major shift right now. Now the Mishnah is going to begin speaking about the produce itself, the peiros themselves. And here is the rule. Peiros may be picked and eaten only once they have attained a certain degree of ripeness. Why? Because in Parshas Bahar, the Torah says, "V'hoisa Shabbos haaretz lochem lo'achla, lochem lo'achla." So Chazal tell us, la'achla v'loy lehefsid. And if you pick a fruit prior to it reaching a certain level of ripeness, even though you picked it to eat it, that fruit, which if you would have left it on the tree, it would have become a bona fide fruit, and you picking it off the tree, you're ruining it. You're destroying it. You're not allowed to do it. We're not even talking yet about how to pick the fruits, meaning we'll see later that no one is allowed to harvest Peiros Shvius the way you harvested during the other 6 years. We're not even talking about that because really all of the Peiros are owned by all or they are hefker. So I can't go and take everything that's in my field because everything in my field belongs to you the way it belongs to me. We're not talking about that. We're talking about picking one fruit. And the question will be, it's a technical question, at what point is a fruit considered ripe enough for you to be allowed to pick it? The Mishnah is going to give us 2 stages by a fig and 2 stages by the grape. That will be more or less the Mishnah. And we'll see the meaning of the 2 stages. Once it reached the first stage, you can eat it in the field. You cannot yet take it home. We'll see in the Mishnah. Once it reached the next level of ripeness, now it's mamish a bona fide fruit, and now you can even pick it to eat it in your house. This is going to be the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to bring a Mishnah from Masechta Suktzin. Over there we have a Machlokes Tanoim regarding the stage of fruits which will make them be considered oichel concerning being susceptible to becoming tamei. Oichlin could become tamei. If something is not yet oichel, it cannot become tamei. And we're going to make a correlation between the rules over here of when is it considered food, when is it considered fruit, and the Mishnah over there in Uktzin, there also we're speaking about when is something considered a fruit. Elama here is for the dinim of Shvius, and in Uktzin it's menegeh the dinim of being mekabel tuma. Now, we're going to throw in a third topic aside of Shvius and Tuma. We're going to learn in the Gemara about the dinim of Meiser Sheni. And that is like this, that items may be purchased with Meiser Sheni funds, right? Only if it's considered food. Meiser Sheni money can be used in Yerushalmi for Eichlin Mashkin, right? Also for things that you anoint yourself with, but it's for food items. Here also we have to know what is the criteria for something to be food, and we'll see whether it fits exactly the criteria as when is something considered food for it to be able to be makabel tuma. And as we'll develop that what defines food for Meiser Sheni funds is not what you define food concerning items that are susceptible to becoming tamei. So we're going to have really 3 topics in today's daf of when is it considered fruit, when is it considered oichel, shvius, Meiser Sheni. You can only use Meiser Sheni funds for food. The dinim of to be makabel tuma. The Gemara is going to actually, let's see how far we get. We're going to be focusing on a specific fruit, which is going to be the palm of hearts. The way it works is that a palm tree develops new branches every year, or the branches grow every year. And in its initial stage of growth, it's relatively soft. And when you cook it, you can eat it. At some point, it hardens and it's considered wood. And again, we are going to see the topics that we are learning today, how to define the palm of hearts. Is it considered wood or is it considered oichel? And the bottom line of the whole daf today will be is that there will be a big difference of how we determine oichel b'negei dinam shvius versus how we determine oichel b'negei dinei tuma versus dinei shvius. Hearts of palm. Shkoyach. All right, chavra. The coffee will kick in. We had a Sudas Mashiach. There's a lot of wine in everyone's system. Maybe it's good. Not maybe. Vaday, it's good. But we have to have the Mishnah over here. Says the Holy Mishnah. As we mentioned, look inside the Marafulda, 7 lines from the top. What's the issue? From when can you eat Peda Shvis? Because since it says La'achlam, right? And Chazal say La'achla v'loy lehefseid. You can't ruin the Pedus of Shvis. If you are to pick the fruits prior to them becoming halachically ripe, heve lehefseid. It's considered you ruined it. Doesn't matter that you are eating it. But l'daitoi. So from what stage? From what stage? Now, interestingly, I just want to bring in the Rashirilio. He brings another source for the issue. The Rashirilio is in the middle of the right column. It's around 12 lines from the top in the right column. Because the Bepeda Shvi is Asur L'Tolshan Min Ha'ilan. You may not pick it off the tree. Prior to reaching that stage where from now on you're chayiv to tithe it if you were to pick it. Why? Because the Be'inun the Nachis Olai Yushma the Pri, it has to be called a fruit. The time fathers were Torah Kahanim, Tichsiv, Tia, called Tfuas Alechoil, Bikan, She'en Echelas Elatfuam. Mikan Omru, Me'emes Hayuchlan, Peter Soilan, Bishvias, Vechule. Okay, so that is one source. Va'ayin, the rest of that Asherilio, he brings another source. Whichever source you're going to bring, what we have clear is that prior to the fruits reaching a certain stage of ripeness, you are not allowed to pick it. So what is the stage? So says the Mishnah, and we're going to begin with figs, and then we're going to go to grapes. Ha pagin, unripe figs, you may only pick it, misha hizrichu, only once they redden. Prior to them reddening, chavra, the figs, if you have a tree here in LA or in the Holy Land, Lahavdil, they are green. And they go from green to red. When they turn red, they're not fully ripe, but here, now that they made this transition, they are oichel enough, but there's a limit. What's the limit? Oichel b'hem pitoy, only basada. You can only eat it. Eating it with the bread is because everything was eaten with bread while you are in the field and not in your home. Look inside the marafulda. Oichel b'hem pitoy basada. Abo lelaket ulahachnis lebeisoi ein rishoi, that you won't be allowed. For that you have to wait ad gemar bishulan, only when they are fully ripe. And now why is that? Because we have to behave the way most people behave with such a type of fruit. Most people, if they were to pick the fig when it just turned red, they would take a pick it, but they would only eat it in the field. The difference between field and house is the quantity of how much you eat. In English, it would be snacking. People would eat it in the field. No one eats a su'udah in the field. We're not talking about the like Bo'emer and Lubavitch, where they had these tables and they had thousands of Hasidim that made a su'udah. We're talking about, in the field is you're chapping a snack. It's like bread, everything they ate with bread. Today, it's a snack. You pick it off the tree, you put it in the bread. It's called a snack. To take it in the house is you're having a su'udah. Most people would not take it to the house when it only turned red. They would wait for the next stage, when it's fully ripe. Now, what's fully ripe? So the Mishnah uses a word that has to be clarified. The word in the Mishnah is bichelu. And the Gemara, let's see before the Gemara will define the stage. The bichelu. Once it bichelud, now koines letoich beisoi. Not only can you eat it in the field, you may even gather it into the house. Period. In other words, that is where it reached its time for proper harvest. So here we have Misha Hizrichu, and we have the stage of Bichelu. And now, which other product has two stages? And there's only two: figs and grapes. Grapes. Just like we're having these two stages of the fig first. When it comes to Shviz, Bishar Shnei Shavua. When it comes to all of the other 6 years of the 7-year cycle, and you want to know from what stage is there the obligation of Maisres, just like by Maisres, what's the rule? What's Oines HaMaisres? A product has to be called edible, halachically edible, for you to be chayiv, to be ma'aserit. Look inside the Rashi Ilyo, 4 lines from the top on the left column. Chayovin b'maisros, v'hachinami tanan b'mesechtes maisros, perikamom, Mishnah Beis, hate'enim. From what stage? Not from the stage of shehizrichu, but from the stage of mishe yibochelu. Now, in other words, what we are saying, that by Maisres, the first stage doesn't count. The stage of Misha Hizrichu. Why? Because Tahava Shiurayu Tfei Misha Hizrichu, it's a later stage. Why aren't we Machmer? Say that by Maisres also. Even when it reached the Misha Hizrichu, maybe you should be Chayv to be Ma'aseret. Mishum, Tikaba Maisik Siv, Tfuas Zarecha, right? The tfuah of your seed, and the drashina la'el b'perek stei alavan, that davar kishezoyrim oisem atzmiach. When is it that when you pick a fruit, if you want, you can already remove its seeds and plant them, and the seeds will take hold? And normally, when is that? When something reached at least a third of its full development. And as you have the rule of a shlish for oinas hamaisres b'chlal by tfuah, so says that Rashi Ilyo v'kim luhu l'rabanan, that when it comes to figs, the bichelu have a shlish. This concept of a shlish, I don't think has to mean exactly a shlish. It means they knew that if you're going to pick the fig prior to its reaching the bichelu stage, the seeds won't be potent enough to be able to reproduce. And the rule of Maisres is always that koyach. Tfuah zarecha. It has to be a tfuah that has a seed that's functional. Gewaldig. These are good rules. Right? A man is able to reproduce when he's 9 years old. You're learning that by grain, a shlish. What's the shlish? By the fig, not she'izrichu, but bichelu. Period. Now, next topic in the Mishnah, haboiser, unripe grapes. Here we also have 2 phases. Phase number 1 is mishevi mayim. Once you are able, when you squeeze it, if it reached the size that when you squeeze it, it produces juice, then again, since people would commonly eat that as a snack, they would not take it home. They would leave it more on the tree, on the vine. But if it reached that stage, they would snack on it. Then the same thing will be on the Shemitah year. Then you can eat it in the field, right, with your bread. What's the on Shviz? It's ripe enough. You're not being mafsid if you're just taking it for a snack, but you can't gather it home. But once it reaches the next level of hivish stage, I'll tell you right away, is when the skin becomes transparent enough that you can see its seeds. And the Rebbe spoke many times that I remember about the uniqueness of a grape, that from all of God's creations, the klipas noiga, what's klipas noiga? Jews are compared to a grape, right? In ve'hagefen, the truth is, Jews are compared to many other fruits. But the reason why we are compared to a gefen, to a grape, is because even though the grape has a klipa, the klipa doesn't block its contents, and you can see all the way to the seeds. And that's the only klipa in the natural world that allows itself to be seen through, which is the whole idea of klipas noiga, that the Eibishter is being milim, but we are able to see through all the way to the seeds. But that transparency is what's called hivish, takes more time. Only when it reaches hivish, then koines l'toich beisai. And now the same thing. V'chein kayotze boy. We gave 2 stages. Only the latter one is hivish. Same thing. B'shana shnei shavua. When are you chayiv to be ma'aser? right? That means if I pick any product too early, I'm not going to have any chiyuv to tithe it. All of the tithings. From what point? So again, generally the rule is once it reaches a shlish. How do you apply a shlish of grain to a grape to the hivish stage? That is the later stage. Prior to the stage, let's go with the same logic. If you were to pick the grape when it only reached mishahevi umayim, the seeds are not potent enough for it to reproduce. And that's why you won't be chayv in maisus. So very good. What did we leave open in the Mishnah? By the fig, the bichelu. What's bichelu? That's the opening of the Gemara. Ma'u bichelu. Rabchia barba amar. It means that choisa, it grew large. Vasas pshat, it grew large. Look inside the second to last line in the Pnei Moshe. Ma'u bichelu choisa. Koloimer nisbashla ma'at. It's beginning to develop. The nire is gedoyle. It's beginning to appear big. Where do you have the word in scripture bichelu, meaning it's getting large? Kamada teimar vegam nafsham bochalu bi. And the word bochalu in that pasuk in Zechariah is speaking about growing large. Okay. It's a pasuk. It's an admonishing pasuk. It's not a positive pasuk. It doesn't matter the content. The word b'chala means growing large. Now, how do you define growing large? I have no idea. I don't know how you define it. I know by people. I'm going back to a person. I know that sometime right after bar mitzvah, our bachim to give a last first spurt, begin to grow. I don't know what does it mean to grow large. Evidently, by the figs, they don't grow a little bit every day. They stay stunted, and then there is like a growth spurt, and the first growth spurt is what Chazal called bichelum. Okay, where do we find the source for these two stages? That's the biggest chiddush. In other words, maybe everything should have one stage. Either it's not yet ripe enough, or it reached the ripeness. By oinas hamaisras, we don't have two stages. So Zog the Gemara, it says in Pashas Bar Ksif, and the emphasis will be on the word tuvua. So in one pasuk it says that the tuvua should be for consumption. For whom? For the animals, for the chayas. It says in another pasuk, two psukim. In one of them, it says from the field, min hasadeh. That's the latter one. In the first pasuk, it doesn't say min hasadeh. Does not say min hasadeh. So from there we see Rabchia barba Omar shtei tfuos. One of them can even be eaten from the house. That's the first pasuk. And the second pasuk, the achas min hasadeh. In other words, when it says in the first pasuk that we quoted, tfuah is used when something reached the stage that it's normally taken into the house, or it's eaten without restriction. Tfuah. The next pasuk that it says only min hasada doesn't mean it's coming from the field. Everything is coming from the field. It means you can only eat it in the field. Let's read inside. I said very good. The first pasuk doesn't say min hasada. So the first pasuk is that it's fully mature, and the second pasuk is only that you can eat it min hasada. And daf lamed aleph amid beis. That's the source that we have from these two psuk. Abdi Yosi bar ben Chanina boyim. Pagin are these grapes that just turned red. They're ripe enough to eat them in the field. The first stage, can you turn it into some sort of medicine? What's the shaila? Let's read it inside. Let's go straight to the Mara Fulda. Then we'll read the Gemara inside. Melugma is tach boishes v'retia al gaba makasa. You want to make it into some sort of ointment. What's the shaila? Boy ashaz. On one hand, since it's mature enough, you are allowed to pick it to eat it in the field with your bread, maybe. You can't turn it into a medicine. That kol on the Shemitah year. Anything that's designated for human food, because there's a kedusha there. Oy dilma ma'achar she'em machnisin l'teicha bayis ad bochelu, or if it doesn't become that large, lo have a miyuchad l'meichel, and therefore maybe you're not restricted in keeping it only for food. Now let's read it in the Gemara. On one hand, do we say ma'achar shu oichel men pita basadem, so it's considered oichel, and we know that something that's miyuchad l'meichel adam, you can't make it into a medicine, so it's already usher to be made into a medicine. Or on the other hand, ma'achar, let's go with the version she'ein machnis l'teicha bayis. It's not fully oichel. V'haraya, you have a restriction, so maybe yehei mutar, and that question remains unanswered. And now we're moving on from inyan le'inyan. When is something considered food when it comes to the dinam of Tuma and Tara? So now we are quoting a Mishnah in Mesechtas Uktzin. The Mishnah here is Pei Gimel Halacha Vav, and we're going to have soon another part of Halacha Zayin from Mesechtas Uktzin. But let's begin with Pei Gimel Halacha Vav. The Mishnah says Tamon Tanin, and over there we learned Hapagin. Hapagin is unripe fruit. Now at this point, we think that Hapagin refers to all unripe fruit. In our Mishnah, the only two items that have two stages were figs and grapes. Pagin means unripe, and again, the Havamina is that in Uktzin we're speaking about all fruits that are unripe, and we specify grapes. Grapes are something chashuv. V'haboisid and unripe grapes. So Rabbi Akiva says they are already considered oichel enough, mitame tumas oicholin. In other words, Rabbi Akiva.
It's interesting because
what was that?
It's interesting because in modern Hebrew, haboser correlate to all fruit, the pagin correlate to te'ena and grapes. התאנה חנתה פגיה, it's from שיר השירים, והגפנים שמדר נתנו ריח. So it's here that the boser is correlate to the grapes.
Always. Boser is always, many times, is unripe grapes, but ripe enough. In other words, pagin and boiser means the same thing. Elama, grapes are so chashuv, it has its own name. Good to know. That's so again, Vlad says, what's the definition of unripe grapes? Not that you can see through the klipa, but there's enough juice that if you squeeze it, juice comes out. Good, mamish, we're learning good dinim. So you can make wine from it. Very good. Alama, you can't replant it. That's the point. Now, so again, Rabbi Akiva is the machmer. Rabbi Akiva holds that it's classified as fruit in this early years of stage. Now, guys, remember there's a machlokes Rashi Tosfos when it comes to tumas eicholin. L'kula alma, guys, for a fruit, for food, for any oichel, to be able to be mitame with ashva. We just had this in Chitas, and we're learning it again, Parsha Shmini. Even Bnei Eretz Yisrael, right? You're reading again Parsha Shmini this week, Chitas. So in Shvi and Shabbos, there's acquiring. Just remember, acquiring tuma is mitame with achidik. To acquire tuma, mitame means to impart tuma. Oichlin needs the sides of a kibetza, either for sure to be mitame. If it doesn't have the size of a kibetza, it cannot impart. There's a machlokes rishonim whether there is a limit for it to acquire. Some hold that a mashu could become tummy. So, but forget about the shear. It has to be oichel. So Rabbi Akiva holds pagin b'haboisin is already metame tumas eicholin. Rabbi Yechon no, it's the later stage. Mamish the way we learned in the Mishnah. What's the later stage? Misha yavoyu lo oinas hamaisres. Gavaldik. Okay. Mamish the way we learned in the Mishnah. Now says the Gemara, Tone kan miyad in Uktzin. Rabbi Akiva is the one that holds that it acquires tuma Miyad means not miyad, but from the earlier stage, from the stage that it's only called pagin or and boiser. The leis kan miyad, fragt die Gemara. In other words, we want to clarify. The Gemara is simply asking, what is the shita of Rabbi Akiva? Look inside the Maraful, the 9 lines from the top. The way he's explaining what the Gemara is pointing out. Tana kan miyad, v'leis kan miyad. Shaharei ein apagin roin le'echol. Umashmois Rabbi Akiva hin, that mishahin pagin haven le'oichel. But the imkain ain't kan miyad. In other words, everyone holds that it has to be food. What does Rabbi Akiva hold? Does Rabbi Akiva hold that it doesn't even have to be food? Is it only from pagin and aboiser? Can it already be mekabel tumas eicholin? Like, let's clarify shitas Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Hananya b'shem Rabbi Shimon Lakish says that the pagay te'enem hi masnisa. Don't understand pagin is referring to all unripe fruit. No, when it comes to all other fruits, even Rabbi Akiva will hold that a fruit prior to its reaching the equivalent of a shlish by tfuah, which is the later stage in the Mishnah, by other fruits, it won't be susceptible to becoming tamei and it cannot impart tumah. But there is something unique by figs and by grapes. And when the Mishnah writes in Uksen Perek Gimel Halacha Vav, hapagin is only referring to grapes. In other words, ha b'shar kol hapagin, what our Mishnah called boiser. But all other unripe fruits, even Rabbi Akiva will be moida eina metamen tumas eicholin ad sheyavoy lo'oinas hamaisres, which will be equivalent to the later stage in our Mishnah, both of the figs and of the grapes. Okay. In other words, there's a difference between figs and grapes and all other products. And Amar Rabbi Yoisa, indeed, this explanation or this limitation of Rabbi Hananya b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that Rabbi Akiva, who's machmer, his chumrah is only by the unripe figs, obviously, and grapes. Boiser is grapes. Pagin doesn't mean all fruits; it only means figs. He proves it from our Mishnah. What from our Mishnah? That hapagin. Same thing, our Mishnah uses the words pagin. And what is the Mishnah here referring to? Our Mishnah is referring to unripe figs alone. And the Mishnah clearly states that when it comes to the dinim of tithing, you have to wait to the latter stage. So clearly you see that we differentiate. There's something unique about figs, and zikr, there's something unique about grapes. Very good. Okay. And I'll tell you something clearly, that the next Mishnah, I mean, the Gemara doesn't have to bring it, but we'll learn, God willing, tomorrow, the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Beis will say befedish that all other fruits may not be picked on Shvius until they reach the Oynes HaMaisres. Mishnah says clearly. In other words, our Mishnah only spoke about figs. You can argue, how do you know our Mishnah is only speaking about figs? Because in the next Mishnah, the Mishnah clearly says all other products. So just like we find in Masechtas Shvius that hapagin is only referring to figs, in Masechtas Uksin, hapagin doesn't mean all the fruits. Even Rabbi Akiva will agree that when it comes to all other fruits, before it reaches Oynes HaMaisres, which is a shlish by tfuah, which is when its seeds can reproduce, it's not going to be susceptible to tumas eicholin. And our topic, the Masechtas Uksin, like over here we have a Masechtas Shvius, makes unique figs and grapes. Okay, says the Gemara, Rabbi Pedos b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, that hakoil moedim b'shvius. What's amazing, even though we have a machlokes in Uksin between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri, Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri says that no, that pagin and boiser, they are only mekabel tuma from the shlish stage. He will be moide over here by shvius, that already from the earlier stage you are allowed to pick it to eat it in the field. In other words, says the Gemara, what does the Gemara mean? What does B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan mean? That Hakoil Moedim, Chavraya Amrim, what are they Moedim? Listen to this. She'ein. In other words, he didn't say on which side. What are they Moedim? Is it the way we said it? Or is it on the opposite side? Maybe they both agree, unlike our Mishnah, that unripe figs and unripe grapes cannot be picked in the earlier stage. So which one? So Chavraya Amrin, she'ein mitamin tumas eicholin. They all agree that when it comes to the dinim of tuma, you have to reach the latter stage. Since they are not obligated to be tithed, they're not subject to the dinim of tumas eicholin. That's the Gevaldika rule. And when it comes to the rule of eating something off the tree, that doesn't follow the same criteria. Beautiful. Now that we quoted Perek Gimel Halacha Vav, now we're going to go to Masechtas Uktzin. We're going to go into the next Mishnah there. Perek Gimel Halacha Zayin. Says the Mishnah over there in Uktzin, Hakoid is the heart of palm. Ke'etz l'chol davar. And as we explained in the words of introduction, that the branches of a palm tree grow, and the new growth is called koir, palm heart. You don't say palm heart in English? Hearts of palm, and it's soft, and it eventually hardens. And how do we classify it? So says the Mishnah, that even prior to it hardening, it's normally soft in its first year. The Mishnah says, it's considered wood. We'll see soon, why is it considered wood? You are allowed to use meiser sheni money to buy it. In other words, even though it's not considered peitis, it's called peitits and eitz. Is it a peiti or is it an eitz? Peiti because it grows every year. No, it's an eitz. But when it comes to the dinim of what may be purchased with meiser sheni, there has to be two criteria. And here are the words, guys. Pri, mi pri, these are the words. A fruit from a fruit. We're going to get it, guys. We have the next Masechta is Trumois, and the next Masechta is Meiser. So we're going to become familiar with this. Pri, mi pri, we have this in Chitas. And Gedulei Karka. And heart of palm is called Pri, mi pri. It's called Gedulei Karka. But it itself is called eitz. So that's the Mishnah. Another din, here we're speaking about immature dates. And that Asher Elio says, Tamarim kitanim shel dekel zachar. The immature dates on a male dekel tree, they are considered food. They are considered food. So, guys, just an example. Will it become tamei tumas eicholin? Well, the heart of palm, no, it's an eitz. Even though, ironically, you can buy it with kesef meiser sheni. And on the other hand, these immature dates, they are considered oichel, so they acquire and they impart tumas eicholin. But niftaros min ha-meisres, they are completely exempt from tithing. Look inside the Asher Ilio, 8 lines from the top in the left column. That we're speaking about now the ucheni funiyos, that they are koichol l'chol davar. For example, mitamais tumas eicholin mikabetz. Or another din of oichel. What's oichel? If someone makes an oath, I will not eat foods that are edible, you can't eat them already. Another din of foods. He's giving all the dinim. What about carrying on Shabbos? We just learned in the Rambam. So when it comes to carrying, you have to have the minimum amount for you to be chayiv chatos. And by yoicholin, it has to be the shir of a groigeres. So it's considered food that if you carry the amount of a groigeres, of these unripe dates, you're going to be chayiv chatos. Or if you eat them on Yom Kippur, we just learned this in the Rambam. So by Yom Kippur, normally shiurim is kazayis, by food. By carrying, it's a gregeres. Then you have the dinim of kibetza. If you want to wash for hamoitz, if you want to make a bracha al netilas yadayim, you have to wash for a mashu. But to make a bracha al netilas yadayim, you have to eat a kibetza. If you are going to eat on Yom Kippur, when did you take away your affliction? When you ate the amount of a koiseves. Okay, seves hagasa that Rambam just wrote. We just learned this yesterday in Rambam, or 2 days ago. Okay. But in all of these dinim, they will be exempt from maisres. Why? As we are learning, because for you to be chayiv maisres, the product has to have a seed that is able to reproduce. And when these dates are in the phase where they are called uchenufeniyos, that means that they are immature, they can't reproduce, so they are completely exempted from all maisres. Okay, nukuda, end. Now, says the Gemara, Dorash Rabbi Yehuda bar Pazi beis midrasham. When it comes to the koir, now that we have a Mishnah Masechtas Uktzin that it's called ke'etz, the only exception is that you can use Meiser Sheni money on it and cook it and eat it. So Zakt said Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, Ein kedusha shvis chalaleim, because kedusha shvis only applies either to human food, right? We learned this already, or to animal food. By the way, what we didn't let you yet learn, I didn't say this before, is that if something was made to give a color, it also has in it kedusha shvis. But the general rule is it has to be oichel adam, oichel behema, or for dyeing. Wood, that's clear. We already learned before about many times about wood. Wood is not imbued with kedusha shvis. Okay, so since the Mishnah says hakoir ke'etz l'chol davar, so therefore there's no kedusha shvis. Turning to the Lamed Beis, that is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi. Aber Rabbi Yoisa, even it's edible only after you cook it, and since it will become wood, so halachically it's like wood. Now, it says Rabbi Yoisa, mefaktin al shoy alehom, those who asked him regarding the status of the heart of palm on the Shvi'is year, like for example, you can't take Shemitah produce outside Eretz Yisrael. So can you take it outside Israel? Rabbi Yosi told them that it does have Kedusha Shvi'is. Look inside the top of Moshe. Rabbi Yosi mefakten al shoy aleho, al shoy al enoisoi, for the people who asked him the shaila regarding the heart of palm, he would tell them that yes, that you should behave with it with kedusha shvi'is. And why he used to ask them, why are you even asking me a question? The answer is because Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi said it's not, but he was like upset. And and he asked them, Min lochoin me markein, back in the Gemara. Why are you even asking a question? And Vahava Amrin, and they told him the truth, that who Amar loin, who means Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yoisa. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but Masnisa pliga al Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, that I found a Braisa. And the Braisa is umisayalan. He'll support us. The Tani, we learned in a Braisa, Hapagin shall shvis. Again, we already clarified, Chevra, that the word pagin, which could be a generic word, here in our sugya, pagin is referring specifically to unripe figs. The din is, ein sholkin oisan. You're not allowed to cook them extensively. Why? Because when you cook them extensively, they become inedible. You completely change them. And since even pagin are considered oichel enough, so it's oichel already. That fits with our Mishnah, right? We're learning the dinim of shvis. Uvemesuyafis means that if you have an unripe fig chais, that it's already at the end of the season, it's at the soif of the season, it's at the end of the fig harvest, and they are still unripe. That's much worse. No, it's the unripe in the beginning of the season is normal. It will become ripe. It's already considered meichel. In our Mishnah, you can eat them in the field. In the Braisa over there, it's already considered oichel. You can't extensively cook it. Now, what happens if you have a fig that never is going to develop? It's stunted forever. Even at the soif of the season, it's still unripe. That's not considered food already. And you are allowed to overly cook it. says the Pnei Moshe, because that's the way people will eat it. Very interesting. Anything that's normally eaten by animals don't eat cooked food. Not because anything that people eat, people cook. So when something is unripe, most people use it for animal. Ma'achal cannot be extensively cooked. Once something will never ripen, people decided to eat it themselves. Maybe because at the end of the season, there wasn't enough figs. But once it's at the end of the season, people determined this, you know what, it's good enough. Once people made it into Ma'achal Adam, now it could be cooked. Now, it has nothing to do yet with our topic. Koir, the chaf niyos, heart of palm and immature dates. So here it says, Asur, you're not allowed to cook them extensively. Says Rabbi Yoisa, if you're going to tell me that the heart of palm and immature dates are like wood, if that would be the case, there is no restriction what you could or cannot do to wood. Gewaldig. You can cook wood. Why? Wood is not Ma'achal Adam. It's not even Ma'achal Behem. It's nothing. The eitz asur l'shalkoi. So why would the Braisa say that you can't cook these koirs? Ella begin the kedusha shvis chala olav lefum kach tzarich meimar that it is asur. So now hold on. I have a kasha. Kasha is Rabbi Yossi is bringing a raya from the Braisa. Clearly, the Braisa says that eitz is imbued with kedusha shvis. Okay, but the Mishnah says in Uksin koir is ke'etz. So it must be that when the Mishnah in Uksin said that koir is ke'etz, the Mishnah there was only speaking about tumas oicholin. We separate. By tumas oicholin, we say that the heart of palm is considered wood. Does not acquire tuma, does not impart tuma. But when it comes to shvis, we don't have the same rules. There it is considered oichel, and therefore it's imbued with kedusha shvis. And things that are imbued with kedusha shvis and that are generally eaten by animals may not be sholkoid, because people don't extensively cook to give food for their animals. So we have the rules of shvis, we had some rules of meiser sheni, and we have some rules of tuma